Here are the hero balance changes for Season 11. First off, the knockdown time when two charging abilities collide has been reduced from 2 seconds to 1.7 seconds. This applies to characters such as Reinhardt, Doomfist, Brigitte, and Bob. The devs say that while the counterplay and interaction of these abilities impacting each other is great, it took players out of the fight a little too long. Moving on to tanks, the impact damage of D.Va's boosters has been increased from 15 to 25 and the weapon spread on fusion cannons has been slightly reduced. These changes aim to improve her effectiveness against smaller targets as she became less effective against armored enemies in the previous patch. Next up, Junker Queen's Rampage startup time has been reduced from 0.75 to 0.5 seconds. Jagged Blade also pulls tanks further now as the tank knockback resistance passive was affecting the pull more than intended. As for Orisa, her Javelin Spin cooldown has been reduced from 9 to 8 seconds. She is arguably one of the worst tanks right now and this buff aims to bring back some of her survivability. Moving on to Roadhog, his base health has been reduced from 650 to 600 HP and Take a Breather's damage reduction has been reduced from 50% to 40%. He has been insanely powerful in the last patch, partly due to the headshot damage reduction from the tank roll passive, so these changes help to bring him back in line. Moving on to the DPS, Cassidy has gotten quite a few changes. Magnetic Grenade is now called Flashbang again, however instead of stunning enemies, it hinders them for 1.2 seconds. Its movement speed reduction has also been increased from 30% to 50%, does 45 explosive damage and has a 12-second cooldown. Hinder now prevents crouching movement as well. Deadeye's movement speed penalty now scales down over time from 70% to 35% and the damage reduction also scales down over time from 40% to 0. The damage reduction on combat roll has also been reduced from 75% to 50%. Finally, Fan the Hammer's damage has been reduced from 50 to 45. The devs acknowledge that the homing grenade sometimes felt too unpredictable but want to keep the hinder tool as a counter to highly mobile heroes without reverting back to a full stun. The Deadeye change aims to give a bit more flexibility towards the end of its duration. Mei's secondary fire base projectile size has been slightly reduced but the damage has been increased from 75 to 85. Her damage output over time is intended to be on the lower side as she offers strong utility and survivability, but the devs want her secondary fire to be more rewarding by increasing its damage and making it slightly harder to land. Next up, the spread on Reaper's Hellfire shotguns has been reduced slightly and the cast time on Shadow Step has also been reduced from 1.5 to 1.2 seconds. These changes help make Reaper more effective against smaller targets as much of his value previously revolved around pressuring larger tank heroes. Sojourn has also received a few changes where some of her burst power has been shifted into a sustained primary fire damage. Firstly, the damage scaling on Railgun's secondary fire has been reduced from between 30 and 130 damage to between 1 and 100 damage. He can also now pierce enemies outside of overclock. Her primary fire shots per second has been increased from 14 to 16. Overclock's energy charge rate has also been increased from 100 to 120 per second. These changes reduce the burst damage potential of the secondary fire railgun shot but make her primary fire damage feel more consistent. Last but not least, Symmetra has finally received some buffs where her base health has been increased by 25 and her primary fire charge rate has been increased by 25%. The developer comments say, to help solidify Symmetra as a close range threat, we're increasing her health to better survive in that range, along with how quickly her primary fire beam damage ramps up. Moving on to supports, Illari's healing pylon heals have been increased from 30 to 40 but is only half effective for Illari herself. The maximum health on the pylon has also been increased from 100 to 125. On top of this, the damage from outburst has been increased from 10 to 25. The devs say that the healing pylon is intended to be useful for healing in safe positions without much focus and to enable Illari to apply pressure with her primary fire and rely less on her secondary fire healing. Kiriko finally gets a nerf and Protection Suzu no longer cleanses hard knockdown stunts, such as Reinhardt's Earth Shatter. However, this doesn't apply to things such as Ana's Sleep Dart effect. The cooldown on Swift Step has also been increased from 7 to 8 seconds. Finally, Mercy and Lifeweaver get 0 changes despite being the worst supports currently.